an evacuation. Our vehicles were gassed up, and we had packed our bug-out bags for the 4 of us, including my 2 dogs. About 3:30 on the 28th, my family and I pulled out of the garage into the rain. We said a prayer, and then we started our evacuation. For the next couple of days, we did not know if our house had flooded or not. We sat helplessly as we heard stories of our neighbors who evacuated on Tuesday via the rescue boats, and others who had stayed behind and watched their houses flood. It was a couple days until we found out that our garage had taken on water, but our main home had not. It was nearly a week until we were able to return home. I know my story may be insignificant to many of you, to what a lot of you experienced, including friends and neighbors that I care deeply about. I know there are some people who may never recover from the flooding, and there are people who will carry with them lifelong pain from the flooding related to Harvey. I wanted to have this meeting earlier, however, doing so would have been premature. Waiting until you had the time to assess and begin the process of recovering, collecting questions from residents, which was important for us, along with allowing time necessary for the operators to compile complete answers. Tonight we're going to answer your questions about the levee system and what we know. There will be questions asked, and we will not know the answer. And if we do not know the answer, we will say so, and we'll work on getting you that answer. In addition, there are several forward-looking questions already being contemplated. The LID 19 directors have already asked our operators to complete and report to the board a detailed after-action review. In addition, we have initiated a process of hiring an objective third party to do a peer review of the levee system, along with the operators' policies and procedures. This review will include the 5 whys that are normally applied post-event, such as we are doing an after-action review or in a root cause analysis. The primary goal of this process is to be 100% transparent and determine if it is possible to prevent the flooding that happened associated with Harvey and find out what level of prevention it will entail. This process will take time. It will be detailed and it will be transparent. Once the results of the after-action reviews, along with the peer reviews, are completed, the LID will publish the reports via our website, and they will be made public for all to see. In addition, we will conduct future meetings to cover the findings and next steps. I cannot imagine an event with this magnitude, and once our after-action reports and peer reviews are completed, that we do not find some ways to improve our systems, our processes, and our communications. Every event teaches us something, and I'm hoping that we can continue to learn and work together as a community. In addition to the after-action reviews and the post-review, we're looking at other items as well. The installation of a rain gauge at the Thompson Ferry Pump Station, and if you don't know where that is, you will know by the end of the evening. Recommendation of installing a river gauge that is closer to Riverstone than the river gauge in Richmond. Completion of slab evaluations. We will hire a company to provide us with slab elevations, so LID 19 residents know their home slab elevation. I know a lot of people try to figure it out on an iPhone. That's not probably the most scientific way to do it, but we are going to have a process of getting you that information. Before we get started, I want to let you know how this meeting will be conducted. We'll conduct the meeting with mutual respect. We want your neighbors to get the answers to the questions they have asked. We have a lot of people here, and we need to cover a lot of information, and we want to get there in a civil and organized manner. Starting out, we'll say that we're not going to have interruptions, yelling, or shouting. We have a process for the residents to ask questions, and we will follow that process. Questions from those in the areas that flooded are the priority. This session is for LID 19 and LID 15 residents. We will not answer questions from individuals outside the districts. However, you are welcome to leave a written question and your contact information. We're going to answer your questions. We have reviewed hundreds of questions, and we have done our best to consolidate similar questions. And the process was really to try to reduce redundancy. And if you have asked a question, if you've submitted it online, or you have additional questions that come up as part of this process, we will have a process for you people to ask questions as we go forward. So just to recap what tonight's agenda is going to look like. We're going to do an introduction and brief overview of the entities that work and support the levy. Costello, the engineer, will provide an overview of the levy systems. There's a lot of questions on how levies work and how they impacted us, and we'll go into a detailed analysis for that. We will then begin the process of answering the questions that have already been submitted. Once we have exhausted those questions, we will take a brief break. At that point in time, we'll have an opportunity for you to write down and submit additional questions. Then we will restart the meeting, and we will allow you, and we will go through those questions. Some of you who were here earlier know that what we've tried to do is the slides that you're going to see behind us this evening are available to you. You can use the www.riverstonelids.com website and download those slides and follow along. I will tell you some of the text is a little tiny. It's hard for me to read, so you may want to do that if you haven't done so already. So the panelists we have tonight, the folks sitting at the table other than myself, are representatives from Costello. We have Chad Havlinsky and Greg Frank. Representatives from Levy Management Services, Jimmy Thompson and Jeff Perry. And representative for the Mulla Law Group, Nancy Carter. Also represented this evening is we have in the room with us this evening Commissioner James Patterson and Commissioner Grady Prestige. We have representatives from the Fort Bend County Drainage District. We have representatives from the City of Missouri City, from the City of Sugar Land. We have the entire LID board for LID 15. We have the entire LID board, the folks that work with me on LID 19, present as well. We have Fort Bend County 4 constables, including Sergeant Christina Resendez. We have Fort Bend County Precinct 2 constables. We have representatives from the HOA, along with representatives from Johnson Development. At this point, we're going to turn the presentation over to Chad, and he's going to start walking through the levy presentation and taking us through that. Chad?
Thank you, Rob. My name is Chad Havlinsky. I'm the levy district engineer for both LIDs 15 and LID 19.
Chad, excuse me, folks, please. Can't hear you back here.
Is that better? All right. My name is Chad Havlinsky. I'm the levy district engineer for both LIDs 15 and LID 19, which encompass all of Riverstone with the exception of Fort Bend Mud 115. I've been in this business for almost 24 years. One of my partners, Greg Frank, is the senior hydrologist for Costello Incorporated. Both of us have worked on the Riverstone project since its inception in 1998. Costello Incorporated serves as the levy district engineer for 6 LIDs and 1 MUD in Fort Bend County. I'm going to start out by explaining the levy design, followed by the Brazos River gauge conversion, the gravity internal drainage system, a pumped internal drainage system, Harvey path, the Harvey rainfall, the Riverstone drainage system, the evacuation orders, coordination with other jurisdictions, and finally the pump down. I'm going to do more reading than I really want to because people ask a lot of insightful questions, and I want to make sure that I address all those questions to the best of my ability. On levee design, the levee is there to protect Riverstone from the Brazos River flood events. It's effectively a big mound of clay. The levees performed as designed. There were no failures, no weaknesses identified during this event. Same could be said for the event that we had in 16. This levee has performed exactly as we expected. And we expect it to act like that in the future as well. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the 100-year event, okay? The 100-year event is a statistical flood that has a 1% chance of reoccurrence in any given year. Our levees are designed to meet federal standards. The federal standard is our levees are built 3 feet above the 100-year level of the Brazos River. Fort Bend County adds another foot to that. So just meeting the Fort Bend County criteria, your levees are 4 foot taller than the expected 100-year event on the Brazos River. The LID 19 and LID 15 levees are between 5 and 6 feet above the 100-year level. So there's even more freeboard than what the county requires. The 100-year flood level is measured at elevation 55.8 at the Brazos River flood gauge in Richmond, which takes me to my next topic, which is the gauge conversion. No. Could you just advance the slide if whoever's controlling the... down button. This is on mine.
Need to advance the slide.
This is working out great. There we go. One more. There you go. Thank you. We had a number of questions about the conversion of the Brazos River flood gauge to elevations in Riverstone. This slide shows the conversion from the Brazos River gauge to the mean sea elevation at various points in Riverstone. For instance, you'd add 13.8 feet to the Brazos gauge reading to get the elevation at Alcorn Bayou, where the levee hits Alcorn Bayou. Similarly, you'd add 12.1 feet to the Brazos gauge to get to the elevation at Steep Bank Creek. At Steep Bank Creek, the 55.2 elevation recorded during the crest of this event would mean that 67.3 feet at Steep Bank Creek, which is approximately 6 feet above natural ground and still about 6 feet below the top of the levee. So had that levee not been there, the folks in south of Hagerson Road would have seen 6 feet of water in their houses. I'm going to move on to internal drainage design. Next slide. Thank you. We designed the storm sewer collection system and detention systems to store and convey the 100-year event, which equates to 12.5 inches of rainfall in a single 24-hour event and assumes that the Brazos River is low enough to receive water. The 100-year event is a nationally recognized standard to design facilities to. The National Flood Insurance Rate Maps are focused around that statistical flood event. During this event, you can see that the streets are ponded. We can pond up to about 12 foot above the curb, or 12 inches, I'm sorry. But it does drain quickly. Once the rain stops, the water subsides. The detention ponds receive this water and release it at a slower rate to correspond to flow rates that would have occurred had the property remained undeveloped. With every new section development, the overall system is remodeled for the design storm to ensure that no adverse effects are created. Next slide, please. The areas of Fort Bend LID 2, First Colony LID, and Fort Bend County Mud 115 that drain into the upstream portions of Steep Bank Creek over-detain. That is, they provide more storage than is typically required in lieu of a pump station. They have no pump station and are fully dependent on gravity outfall. All three districts predate LID 15 and LID 19, and their gravity outfall into Steep Bank Creek under design conditions is accounted for the pump station design that's located on Steep Bank Creek. While we're on this slide, I'd like to point out there's approximately 2,800 acres in the Steep Bank Creek watershed, with LID 19 occupying about 780 acres of that, and LID 15 occupying about 930 acres of that. The pump stations are shown. The Steep Bank Creek pump station is a 80,000 gallon per minute pump station. The Alcorn Bio pump station is a 150,000 gallon pump station. And the outfalls from those other districts are shown in those red blocks that you see there. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to discuss levee internal design using pumps. The pump system relies on the balance of internal storage and pumping capacity. The mix of the two is used to store and pump a single 100-year event inside the levee when the Brazos River is at flood stage. This assumes that the system is dry and is starting from zero rain in the previous days, so that we have full system storage available to be used during this event. When the river is elevated, the normal gravity outfall is cut off by a set of floodgates. Next slide, please. There are flat gates on the outside of the levee that close by gravity when the water level in the Brazos River is higher than the level inside the levee. This keeps the river water out of Riverstone. There are also backup sluice gates inside the levee that are shut manually once the gravity drainage to the river is no longer available and the flat gates are closed. These are utilized in case something gets caught in the flat gates to keep them from fully closing. The gate design is essential to keeping the river out of Riverstone. During Harvey, the pump stations were fully operational and were not shut down until water levels warranted it. Both pump stations were manned 24 hours a day during the entire event. The Steep Bank pump station has a pumping capacity of 80,000 gallons per minute. The Alcorn Bio pump station has a pumping capacity. Hello. That's fine. Sorry. Going again? Hello. Yeah. The Alcorn pump station has a pumping capacity of 150,000 gallons per minute. Recall that under the design storm, pump size is just part of the equation. The internal drainage or detention storage is the other component. Next slide, please. Hello. I just wanted to bring this slide up as a reminder of Harvey's path and the dates into Texas. Not going to concentrate on this too much.
Switch to green.
Hello. Better. Is that better? Good. All right, next slide, please. I have to bring up the rain, because there were a number of questions and comments that include references about it not raining at some point during this event. Harvey produced the 5th most rain in a single day in Houston on Saturday, August 26th. The very next day, Harvey produced the most rain in a single day in Houston. That's 2 of the wettest days in Houston in 125 years on back-to-back days. And by the way, it rained for 5 straight days. Harvey produced 34.3 inches of rain in Riverstone in 5 days. That's from Friday to Tuesday. That's nearly double the rainfall that the storm drainage system is designed for under gravity conditions. And that assumes we're not pumping to the Brazos River. I had to search, but the nearest published, next slide. I had to search, but the nearest published 1,000 frequency rainfall data is in Benton, Louisiana, which is 35 miles east of Beaumont. Harvey produced almost an inch more rainfall for both the 4 and the 7 day events. At some point, I think somebody's going to classify this event as in excess of 1,000 years. when the statisticians get to it. The point in this rain event, the point of this is the rain event is beyond any modeling that anyone has ever performed, including the federal government. Next slide, please. I know you guys can't see this. When you get back home and you download this presentation, this is the storm sewer system for Riverstone. You can see in pink, that's the LID 15 storm sewer system, and LID 19 is in the green. If you zoom in close enough, you can see pipe sizes and everything else to serve your community for the nerds out there that like to see this sort of thing. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about what happened in Riverstone. On day one, this is Friday night through Saturday, we received our first 12 inches of rainfall, and we had gravity drainage, meaning that Brazos hadn't cut us off. You may have noticed some street ponding, but it subsided as the rain led up between the bands from Harvey. Please note, there are no valves or gates that prohibit water flow in either direction in the storm sewer system that drains your streets. There were several questions about that people wanted us to open the valves to let the water out of the streets. There is none. The drains that those lines were tied to, the ditches that those lines were tied to, were full. That's the point of the day one exhibit. On day two, we received our second 12 inches of rain with gravity drainage for most of the day. Keep in mind, a 100-year event is 12 inches of rain. We received 12 inches of rain the previous day. We received another 12 inches of rain the very next day. We have reduced gravity flow capacity as the Brazos River rises. As the river rises, the flap gate starts to close down, okay? So we turn on the pumps to help increase our flow capacity out of the system as the flap gates were closing. Keep in mind that every drop of water after day one is beyond the design capacity of the drainage system. And these new conditions have not been modeled. All of the streets are now filling up. The detention ponds are at or above their banks, and the creeks and ditches are starting to come out of their banks. And at the beginning of day two, Sunday, at the end of the day on Sunday, the flap gate is closed at by the Brazos River. This is an automatic system. We can't impact that. The Brazos River comes up, the flap gate shuts down. And both pump stations are operating at this point. On day three, the coincident event, the Brazos River is cut off by the flap gate. The sluice gates are down, and we're still pumping. We received another 8.8 inches of rain. The storm sewer is out of its banks. Every pond in the streets are completely full and impassable. Water is in sheet flow conditions. This means it's not contained to just the streets and the storm sewer. It is flowing everywhere. It's between your yards. It goes where it wants to go. And unfortunately, when water is in this condition, it seeks the lowest ground. The lowest ground is that area south of Hagerson Road. That area is about 3 feet lower than the area north of Hagerson Road. Similar conditions exist in Auburn Manor and Stonebrook, but not to the same extent. They're lower elevation than the adjacent communities. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what you see here. On the right hand of the screen, you see kind of the upland areas. The streets are full. At the next street, basically you have water up to people's front doors. In the next street, you have some water in houses and some to the front door. The last house, you've got water in houses. The street totally inundated. Steep Bank Creek is out of its banks. Just water from every direction. Coincidental event. Every storm facility and street is full, and the Brazos is at flood stage that prevents gravity drainage. By the way, we're not finished with the rain yet, guys. We get another 1.3 inches of rain on day 4, which is Tuesday, which is still a healthy summer rainfall in a day. We pray for that in August. I didn't pray for that, certainly on day 4 on Tuesday. Oh, that was in day 5? Day 5, I'm sorry. Again, this volume of rain has never been modeled by anybody. The area south of Hagerson Road flooded because it was the lowest elevation in the watershed. Water was flowing from Steep Bank Creek through storm sewers and streets and overland. There were several questions about filling these areas prior to development. The area didn't require fill to remove it from the 100-year floodplain, which is the design criteria. The levee provides that protection from the river, and indeed it performed that function as designed. The general topography in Fort Bend County is that land falls from the northwest to the southeast. As an example, the western edge of Riverstone is almost 9 feet higher than the southeast corner. Next slide, please. I'm going to move on to talk about the evacuation orders. Both the operator, which is LMS, Levee Management Services, and the engineer monitor the real-time stormwater activity for the districts. We were involved 24 hours a day from the day the rain started to the day the Brazos allowed us to regain gravity drainage. At no time were we ever away from our phone, our computer, or out in the field. On an evening phone call with the Fort Bend EOC on Sunday, August 26th, the preliminary Brazos River crest elevation of 59 was discussed. With the likelihood of access to and from LID 15 and LID 19 being compromised, we recommended to the judge to request a voluntary evacuation order, even though we believed that the levee would not be overtopped at that elevation. The next morning, Monday, August 27th, on the LID phone call with the EOC, an additional 15 inches of rain was predicted by the National Weather Service over the next 3 days. Knowing that we had already lost gravity outfall and the system was well beyond its design capacity, we recommended a mandatory evacuation to the judge for both LID 15 and LID 19 because we knew that the excess water would make most streets impassable. This level of rainfall has never been modeled by anyone, and we made our best guess on how the system would react. The mandatory evacuation order was released by Fort Bend County 2 hours later. On Monday alone, we received 8.8 inches of rain. That volume of rain caused an already full system to raise the water levels more quickly on the south side of Hagerson Road. The release of the evacuation order for LID 15 and parts of LID 19, the release of evacuation order for both LIDs was granted once the streets were clear for emergency vehicles. The slide you see up there is the evacuation order and the pump run times and the rainfall accumulation for the Steep Bank Creek watershed. You can see that when the gates are open, which is in green, the gates are closed, which is in red. Then you have the main Steep Bank Creek pump station in blue is the next line down, and then you have the supplemental pumps, which I'll talk about on the following line. The next blue line you see is the accumulation of rain. The green lines are the Brazos River levels. Then you also have the dates of the evacuation orders in there. The next slide is the same timeline, but on the Alcorn Bio watershed. You can see the pump run times, when the gates were closed, and then basically the same information for the river. Next slide, please. There were questions about the lids in the upstream end of Steep Bank Creek for draining into the creek during this event. None of the upstream districts have a pump station. All of their drainage to Steep Bank Creek is via gravity drainage. All 3 districts' outfalls predate LID 15 and LID 19. Their undeveloped flow conditions for the design storm is included in the design for the Steep Bank Creek pump station. Their floodgates are not installed to restrict flows to Steep Bank Creek. They are designed to prevent flows from Steep Bank Creek from backing into their systems, just like the LID 19 gates prevent flows from the Brazos River from inundating Riverstone. In fact, once the LID 19 outfall was installed at Steep Bank Creek, the other district gates became redundant flood control facilities. LID 19 nor LID 15 regulate flows from other jurisdictions into Steep Bank Creek. LID 15 and LID 19 jointly own and operate the Steep Bank Creek pump station based on their prorated share of the drainage area. Regarding requests to the upstream districts to restrict their flows, LID 19 did make those requests, but they went unfulfilled until their own internal roads were passable by emergency vehicles. Once the streets were clear of water, their floodgates were closed to allow LID 19 to make more progress pumping down LID 15 and LID 19 watersheds. The Fort Bend County LID 2 and MUD 157 through Tuesday, September 5th. No pump was ever offline during that time except when water levels were low on September 4th and 5th when all 4 pumps were not required. The pumping capacity is 80,000 gallons per minute. The pumps are fully automated with alarms when there are malfunctions, but during an event like Harvey, the operator mans the pumps and controls. 8 12-inch supplemental pumps were installed on Thursday, August 31st, and ran continuously until Monday, September 3rd. The total pumping capacity of the supplemental pumps is 40,000 gallons per minute. These pumps were brought in to speed up the drawdown of the ponded stormwater. These pumps were ordered once the flat gates were closed by the river, and we recognized the pumping station was not making progress pulling the water levels down. A storm like Harvey has never been modeled by anyone. Therefore, no one knew what to expect. The Alcorn Pump Station ran from Saturday, August 27th through Tuesday, September 5th. It has a pumping capacity of 150,000 gallons per minute. Like Steep Bank Creek, the pump station was manned and operated for 24 hours a day. There were numerous questions regarding the length of time it took to pump down certain parts of the district. Auburn Manor, Stonebrook, area south of Hagerson Road. Auburn Manor is located at one of the furthest points from the outfall of Alcorn Bayou, the pump station in Alcorn Bayou, and is located at one of the lower elevations in the watershed. Because of this, the area is going to be one of the last to recognize the receding water. Stonebrook is in a similar situation, just in the Steep Bank Creek watershed. The area south of Hagerson Road took a long time to pump down because of the vast watershed that was at pool level with that area. The area south of Hagerson Road, being a few feet lower than the majority of the watershed, was going to be the last to have a noticeable water drop. With water spread out in ponds and streets throughout the community, dropping the water level takes a lot of time. Once the water is in the creek and ponds only, the water level is able to drop more quickly, like a funnel, which is the next slide, which I doubt we'll be able to make work.
Can you click into slide, please?
Nope. Maybe I can describe it. Works here. Go back a slide, please. What the funnel was supposed to show is the pump system has a set amount for volume of water that it can pump out at a single time. What the funnel does is it shows that you have a huge watershed with a certain amount of water on it. As you shrink that watershed, that same volume of water is able to pull that water down much quicker. When you have a huge watershed, it's only going to pull it down a little bit because you're trying to pull water out of streets, out of detention ponds, out of creeks, out of everything. So all we're trying to show is when y'all saw we were receiving emails all the time about those pumps aren't working, they're broken because I'm not seeing the water levels go down. They were going down, they were just going down very slowly. Lastly, there was a question in regards to whether or not the flood maps prepared by FEMA will be changed after Harvey. We don't speak for FEMA. In fact, they don't ask our opinion for much at all. However, it's just an opinion. We don't think that FEMA is going to change the flood maps due to Harvey. They recognize that this was an event far exceeding the 100-year event, which is what those maps are designed for. Is that statistically, that statistic form, or a storm. That concludes my part of the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chad. Okay, Chad gave us a great overview of the levee system, how it works, and how it impacted Riverstone. What we're going to do now is we're going to start the process of answering the questions that people submitted online, and that we were able to go through, collate, and put like questions together. The questions we start out with are going to be on the operation of the actual system and the process. Please describe routine testing procedures and frequency that is undertaken to ensure the levee system and equipment is in perfect working condition. And that question we're going to hand to LMS.
Good. Thank you, Rob. I'm Jimmy Thompson with Levee Management Services, and I also like to introduce Jeff Perry. Jeff Perry is our general manager, and he was the one that was actually in the field during the operations of during the storm. The question was the testing procedures and frequency. We have a operations manual that is based on the manufacturer's recommendation, also written by the engineer, Costello, and on various inspections. And let me give you an example. We are on the levee systems weekly. We both walk that system and we drive that system looking for any deficiencies. The pumps are inspected daily at the pump station. And then we have a testing procedure on the drainage systems, and the whole system is inspected by us in the detention ponds and your conveyance systems. The generators, we have what we call a quarterly PM, where we have a third party. They come out and they actually fire up the generators, and they inspect them for their efficiencies. And then we have what we call a transfer switch. These are electrical vertical pumps, and we have what we call a transfer switch, so run by electricity. During this event, we did not lose power. In the event that we did lose power, we have a gas system. Many of the systems have a diesel backup generators. In this case, we have a gas backup system. And in the event you lose power, you have what you call a transfer switch. That transfer switch immediately transfers from an electrical to a gas operation, and that switch is tested on a daily basis by a third party. Jeff, you want to add anything to that?
The only thing I will add to that is also we do gate maintenance. Twice a year we go out and we inspect all the gates within the district. These are all the flood control gates that are there, make sure they are greased and fully operational at all times. That's both flap gates and sluice gates throughout the district.
Please describe preparations performed specifically by the LID after Harvey arrived and the intensity predictions were made.
Okay, well actually, again, our procedures, once we have a named event in the Gulf of Mexico, LMS, we go into our emergency operation procedure. We have internally where we prepare all of our crews, our crew assignments. We top off our trucks, we maintain our equipment, and then depending on the system, then we would top off all the diesel tanks and that sort of thing. Then Jeff assigns the crews and the rotation during the event. As a matter of fact, in the case of Harvey, in this particular pump station, we were having to bring our operators on 12-hour shifts in by boat. Because of the high water in the streets, we could not get in and out. So we have a sister company that has boats, and we were bringing our gentlemen in and out on boats. I believe the intensity, obviously we're in the middle of emergency operations at that time, and we are in the stations 24/7 until the event, and actually until we start gravity flowing again. Jeff, any comments?
Next question. Can you work pumps when the gates are open?
Yes, you can, and if you notice on your graph, typically our preference is gravity flow, obviously based on the volume. When you're gravity flowing, we're being able to get a lot of water out of the system a lot quicker. In this case, because we did see water coming up at a higher level than we normally have experienced, we did start the pumps prior. You have to understand 80,000 GPM is somewhat minimal compared to gravity flow, but yes, we can operate the pumps with the gates open, and we did.
Thank you. Is there an alarm on the pumps if they are not working? And this is a question we get a lot. Why can't I hear the pumps?
Hopefully you're glad you don't hear the pumps if you live close to it. Yes, there is an alarm. The pumps can come on automatically. They are monitored by a computer system. As a matter of fact, Jeff and I were just debriefing is, in this particular case, it's a very modern system. where we're going back and we've downloaded the times, and actually when the pumps came on, when we turned them off, the run times, capacity, amperage load, and that sort of thing. So it's an extremely up-to-date system. The question was, is there an alarm? Yes, there is an alarm. Many systems are designed not to be physically manned. We feel comfortable being there, and so that's why we have a staff member or an on-site 24/7 during the event, as I mentioned, on 12-hour shifts. Why you can't hear them, these are vertical turbines, electrically run, and literally they could be running in this room and you could almost carry on a conversation. They're very, very quiet pumps and very efficient. Yep.
The only thing I will add is on the alarms itself, there's alarms throughout the entire pump station. So not only is there alarms on our actual pumps, but we have a remote monitoring system, which we call an RMS in the field, and that system tells us if anything's going wrong. So if we lose power at the pump station, if the generator fires up, if a pump turns on or off, or if we have high water that we're unaware of, we get a text message, we get a phone call, or we get an email letting us know what's going on in that pump station. Again, in a hurricane situation like this, I do not let my guys leave the pump station. We're making sure we're there. But there is an extensive alarm system throughout the pump station.
Chad covered this a little bit, but we want to review this again because we did get this question quite a bit. At what Brazos River water level do floodgates close and Steep Bank Creek, LID 19, become pump dependent?
Okay. Thank you, Rob. I think in the slide presentation, that is the river actually closes the gates. It's a gravity system. When the water comes up, the flap gates are closed. It is not a manual operation. We do not manually go out and close those gates. It's all based on the river elevation itself, and they close at the river's elevation 39 at the Richmond gauge. Now, once those gates are closed, then we do go out and we close the sluice gates, which is a backup system. And the intent on those, in case you have, say, a log or something in those flap gates, that we're not getting backflow into the system. So the gates close automatically, and then we go back and close the backup system immediately after that at elevation 39.
And similar question for Elkhorn Bayou. I believe the elevation there is 40.
Elevation is 40.
There are control gates on Steep Bank Creek near University Drive. When and how are they employed? Are they manual or automatic?
Chad, I'm going to refer that to you, please.
Maybe I'll take that one. Hello. I got it. The gates at Mud 115 operate just like your gates to the Brazos River. There are flap gates on the outside, sluice gates on the inside. The flap gates are automatic. We don't touch them. When the elevation on Steep Bank Creek is higher than the elevation inside the district, flap gates close shut. They are redundant. With the construction of the outfall at LID 19 to Steep Bank Creek, Steep Bank Creek shouldn't get any higher to force water back in their system. So.
There's a question that we get quite a bit as well. Why did it take so long to get additional pumps in place to get the water out of, if it was clear that the gates would be closed on the Brazos River, and predictions in the fact that we were anticipating higher precipitation?
Chad, let me take just a question. Is obviously, as Chad mentioned, this was an event that we've never experienced before in our normal operations. As we started seeing the water in continuous rainfall, I believe Jeff, our general manager, and Chad got together and they made a collaborative decision to bring in the pumps. And Jeff, since you were on the site, I'll let you comment on that.
One of the main things that we did is we noticed that inside the pump station we were falling behind, and we were falling behind quickly. And when that happened, Chad and I got together. We had a lot of conversation about what was going on, and we immediately made that call to start getting pumps in. As you know, everybody in Houston was affected. A lot of people outside of Houston were affected by this. So this was a phone call that was made, and we were bringing in pumps from wherever had them to get them to us as quickly as possible. Again, we did not know how the system was going to react with this much amount of rain. This is the first time anyone has ever seen this. Even countywide, with all of the other levee districts that we operate, there was a lot of internal drainage systems that were having a hard time keeping up. We brought pumps out to handle that load, but this was a system inside of Riverstone that's been unmodeled, never seen before, and we were reactive to what we saw as we were seeing it.
This event will be modeled. We will know what happened. We have to know what happened. We have to do our best to see that we do everything we can to keep this from happening again.
During the storm event, can you lower the water levels in the amenity lakes to provide for more capacity?
Believe it or not, the amenity portion of the lakes is at the flow line of the ditches. So, no, we'd have to pump those, we'd have to pump them dry, and two, when you start pumping them dry, all the bulkheads collapse. So you're creating a bigger problem by trying to pump it out. The design storm assumes that the water levels in those amenity lakes are at that level. That is the dry condition. So,
We saw this on the news, and I was just informed that the levee, either in our neighborhood, Riverstone, or Sienna, has breached.
That is absolutely incorrect. Actually, on Wednesday and Thursday after the event, and during the event, and I'm gonna let Jeff address during the event, we continually inspected the levees, both visually, we had people on the levees, and we also drove the levees during the storm itself, which is somewhat dangerous. On Wednesday and Thursday, and again on Friday during the week while we're still pumping, we had a flight restriction over this area, but I was able to get a helicopter and we flew out of Sugar Land and we visually inspected all of the levees along the Brazos River that we operate. We flew somewhere around 200 feet, and what we were looking for was either deficiency and any sloughing off and that sort of thing that maybe we couldn't detect from the ground. When you're in the air, and we have a lot of visual photos of that, obviously on the external of the levee, the Brazos River, and you've seen it, all the muddy water and that sort of thing. Everything internally was clear, or we saw no mud. So basically there was no intrusion of any river water into the levee system. We're dealing strictly with rainfall. And so that's how we were able to determine, and not only visually, we were inspecting on the ground, but we did 3 aerial inspections as well. And there was no overtopping of any levee. That was strictly a false social media conversation, and obviously created a lot of problems for all of us. Jeff?
Continuing on, talking now about the street flooding and the plug drains. Do we have a system in place to revise the stormwater sewage condition? And if plugs do exist, will there be cleaning out? If not, then consider an implementation of such a program as a preventative measure to reduce the possibility of flooding.
Okay, as far as the internal drainage system of your district, like I said, we go in and we inspect everything around on the outside, all of your storage, all of your detention, all of your channels, everything that's on the inside. All of your streets, we make sure we drive the streets prior to. I know you guys are built out, but there are some other districts around that are still under construction. And if you guys have seen as your house was going up and being built, they put a lot of sandbags in front of the streets. They try to block water. We have to make sure all that is clear as well. In an event like this, I think the question is stating if there's any pluggages or will there be any clean out. As you guys have probably already have seen, there's a lot of street cleaning that has already taken place. And there will be something that we are going to go back with our board and discuss going in and cleaning out all the street, underneath the streets, all the drains and all of the outfall structures that go into your channels to make sure that if we do get another rain, there's nothing in there plugging anything out. So that'll be something that we coordinate with the MUDs to try to handle for everyone.
Thank you. How did LIDS implement and coordinate responses for this event? Was there a war room? Were county, FEMA, Army Corps, and other emergency response teams part of that war room and effort?
Yes. The Fort Bend EOC coordinated all the efforts. The operations team and engineers from all the levee districts were on at least 3 phone calls per day during the entire event, talking about needs, talking about problems. National Weather Service was generally on those phone calls as well, giving rainfall predictions and things of that nature. So hats off to Fort Bend County. They really shouldered the load on this. Greg just reminded me the Corps and FEMA were not involved, although I think the Corps actually was on a few of the phone calls.
Thank you, guys. And then I think that Chad touched on this, but we're going to go to it again. Is there an obligation to accept water from other lids into Steep Bank Creek? Are there any alternative options for them to discharge water to the Brazos?
They have the right to discharge their flows into Steep Bank Creek. They predate Riverstone. We are obligated to accept their flows. The pump station on Steep Bank Creek is sized to accommodate their flows during a design rainfall event, which this obviously was not.
You need to qualify that. It's the storage and the pumping that combined together accommodate all the off-site flows that come through us and from the flows that we produce ourselves within the lids.
Hello. Hi, I'm Nancy Carter. I'm general counsel for the district. I haven't had the opportunity to talk yet, but I just wanted to discuss the legal framework of this and to let people know that, we really did not have the legal authority at that point either to regulate upstream flows into Steep Bank Creek. Now, that being said, we did make an emotional plea to the upstream users to consider restricting their flows into Steep Bank Creek. When we started making these requests, we were sort of doing it in a vacuum, not really knowing a lot of details about the internal conditions of their own districts. And, we were lucky that they didn't have to legally, but they were good neighbors, and when it became safe for them to do so without putting their homes at further risk, they did close the gates. They had no legal obligation to do so. They were just being good neighbors there. So again, we did make that request, but we do not have the authority to regulate that upstream flow.
To carry on to that same question, Nancy, and either you or Costello can touch on this. When did the gate to Steep Bank Creek between Lid 2, Lid 15, and 19 get closed?
The first Fort Bend Lid 2 closed their gates on September 1st, and Fort Bend Mud number 115 closed their gates on September 1st, and First Colony Lid closed their gates September 2nd.
Okay, we're going to actually give the engineers a break, and we're going to let the attorney talk more.
There is Mud 115, which is not in any lid. So this is the original first sections of Riverstone. If you are in the city limits of Missouri City, you are not in either lid. So if you're in Mud 115, you are not part of either levee district system. You have an independent drainage system. You have a direct outfall. As you go into the community on University Boulevard, you can see the gate structures there, right, sort of in the boulevard, the median. Those are Mud 115 facilities. They are not part of the levee district facilities.
We received a number of questions also about how the lids are organized, and I know some folks may not have even realized that we were Lid 19 prior to a couple weeks ago. What is the reason behind the poor communication and connectivity during this flooding event? The residents are already going through suffering and are bounced between Fort Bend County and Lid 19 with no person on the other side to call.
So generally speaking, neither district, and I think this is consistent with other levee districts in this area, none of them have full-time staff. They operate with a team of consultants We have a legal consulting team. Is that me? Okay. I'm having some post-traumatic stress. Is that an emergency
Well, the good
alert?
news is the entire district is dry and we have gravity flow right now.
But going back, we don't have full-time staff. We have a levy operator through LMS. We have an engineer through Costello. I'm just general counsel through my law firm. And so, were we there to answer your phone calls? No, we weren't. And I think that in the after-action review, that is absolutely something that will be studied. It's something that needs corrective action going forward. We will definitely address that. I will say this, we did our best to try to answer questions as they came up. We tried to be responsive through the website, www.riverstonelids.com, in providing updates as we knew them. Beyond that, the districts do have emergency communication methods that you can sign up for through the website. They have text message alerts, voicemail alerts, email alerts, and you can sign up to receive those, and the links are in the website as well. In addition, we did our best to give our daily updates. We tried to do them multiple times per day to the HOA, and I believe the HOA had maybe a larger email database than had signed up for the Riverstone LIDs, and the HOA was our partner in trying to communicate information from us to you. So again, do I think there's room for improvement? Absolutely. Just we'll be working to identify the weaknesses in our communication.
Thank you. Next question is, why such a short amount of time between mandatory evacuation and flooding? Why last minute mandatory evacuation?
I think Chad briefly touched on this, but again, the Levy Improvement District itself does not have the authority to issue an evacuation order. Now, we do provide recommendations to the county judge in evaluating whether or not to evacuate an area. And as Chad had mentioned previously, he's looking at those weather projections, at those river projections in real time. And as soon as that data comes out using the best available information he has, he's making a recommendation to the judge. Now, the judge has a lot of other things to consider in issuing an evacuation order. First and foremost, the health and safety of the individuals who would be subject to that evacuation order. And it's not something that he does lightly. And so I'm sure there's a lot of things that he has to consider, a lot of people he's got to consult with. So again, these weather projections come out, we're reacting in real time. It may take an additional 2 hours for it to get out, but we're really operating as quickly as we can with the information that we have.
The next question comes on regarding comments from long-term residents. There's an area that is designated as non-residential area, then was changed to allow for housing. When was this change approved and under what conditions? But for that, we're actually going to have Trey to come up and speak to that. For the operators in the back, can you go to the last slide in the slide deck, please? Which will have the Riverstone across the top.
While that's coming up, again, my name is Trey Reichert. I'm the general manager of Riverstone, and I'm also the board president of your Riverstone Homeowners Association. Many of you know me from all the years that I've worked with Johnson Development, helping to develop Riverstone. Almost 12 years to be exact. Before I get to the question, first and foremost, I am very aware of how difficult these past few weeks have been for many of you. What gives me hope, however, is seeing neighbors helping neighbors in times of need, not only from within Riverstone, but also in your neighboring communities like Sienna Plantation. So many residents came out to help. First Colony, the schools, all of the clubs, the churches, the organizations that came out to help. I, along with several members of our Johnson Development team, have had the opportunity to meet with many of you alongside volunteers, answering numerous questions over the past few weeks, collecting and distributing supplies to many of your homes, and organizing volunteer and cleanup efforts alongside your Riverstone HOA team. We want you to know that those efforts will not stop until Riverstone is restored to its former beauty. In addition to the work that we are doing in the community, you may have noticed that we have provided packets of information for you as you were coming in this evening. Included in those packets are names of qualified remodeling companies associated with the Greater Houston Builders Association. We are also working directly with all of your home builders. And we want to help get information about the specifications of cabinets, flooring, trim, interior doors, any of the materials that were used in the original construction of your homes. So if you have not reached out to your home builders yet, we highly encourage you to do so. If you don't know who built your home, if you are not the original homeowner, please let us know and we will be happy to provide that information to you. But most importantly, we want you to know that Johnson Development is committed to finding out all the answers to what caused the flooding and making sure the LID takes concrete steps